Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。This week saw a massive gathering of African leaders in China for the three-yearly Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, with leaders from more than 50 African nations heading to Beijing for the three-day event. President Xi announced more than US $50 billion in support over the next 3 years, which might usually lead Western media to push the debt trap diplomacy myth. But guess what? CNN appears to have received the memo to stop using that fake news trope for now, with the majority of African nations confirming Chinese debt trap diplomacy is just another Western coping mechanism. Western media can no longer afford to support such outright lies. Today, I'll take a closer look. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. Over 10,000 kilometres of railways, nearly 100,000 kilometres of highways, almost 100 ports, over 200 schools and more than 130 hospitals. Those are just some of the massive projects China undertook across the African continent between the year 2000 and 2022. But if it was left up to Western media reporters, you'd never know that, since the collective West has played a key role not in helping Africans, but plundering their resources and sucking them dry. That is all changing partly thanks to China shining a massive light on the need to help Africa develop, which has forced Western nations to realize that their gig is up. One of the main tools Western governments and media used to slow down China's role in working towards Africa's development was the term debt trap diplomacy. The idea that China was just helping that continent's nations build roads and railways and schools and hospitals and ports so that it could ultimately force Africans to give up those resources to Chinese control. Of course, that was all just another Western example of the Tonya Harding attitude, showing that the US-led West is much more comfortable smashing other countries in the kneecaps than helping the world to prosper equally. And that desire to knock the rest of the world down, at least when it comes to China's partnerships with Africa, clearly became so obvious that Western media could no longer get away with smearing that win-win cooperation as debt trap diplomacy. Many of the Western mainstream media articles I've read on the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, which just wrapped up in Beijing this week, perhaps reluctantly avoid the debt trap myth altogether. CNN, in their article titled, "Xi Jinping had one message for dozens of visiting African leaders: choose China," did even better. Despite waiting until paragraph 17, they announced that the debt trap diplomacy myth is now a non-starter. Better late than never, I guess. Analysts have largely debunked earlier debt trap claims that Beijing was purposefully seeking to in-debt countries in order to gain leverage over their assets, as it lent towards the construction of highways, rail lines, and power plants across Africa, under Xi's flagship Belt and Road Initiative, the article said. Wow, what a turnaround. But other media have yet to receive the memo. BBC's Africa analyst Paul Malley couldn't bring himself to use the term debt trap diplomacy directly or level any concrete accusations, instead choosing to use non-professional and generalized smears without providing any sources. He wrote, "China is regularly accused of inducing African countries to take on too much debt." Paul, my friend, that is not journalism. Even in a high school essay, you can't just say someone is accused of something without offering sources. I suspect that is because if he delved too deeply, Paul would have to admit that what he's trying to suggest is pure codswallop. That's because, like CNN's Simone McCarthy admitted, China is also not seen by observers to be the main cause of African debt distress in most cases, with debt to its lenders making up a comparatively small portion of the continent's overall public debt. And she's completely right. London-based think tank Chatham House conducted research on Chinese debt in Africa back in 2022, finding that Chinese lenders accounted for just 12% of private and public external debt on the continent. If Africa is indeed in debt crisis, shouldn't Western media cast its attention at its largest creditors? Why not pressure the World Bank to offer debt relief? Well, we all know why. And on that note, you guys, that will be it for today. But I'm curious to know if you saw any mainstream media coverage on the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in your country. Did you hear the term debt trap diplomacy? Do let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.